You've come back from your vacation and you've taken many pictures, but not all the pictures are going to be exceptional. But what if there is a picture that you really want to keep, yet it looks super boring? Well, you don't have to reject it. You can play with all of your rejects and make them look super creative if you need to. And it doesn't have to be hard either. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you one of my rejects, and I'm going to show you an easy way to make this picture look more interesting. What you are seeing on the screen is the finished image. Now let me show you how I have achieved this. This is the original image that I took in Budapest this year. Before I start, it's important to notice that I'm working within Camera Raw. Every image that I shoot is a RAW file. The first thing I'm going to do is I'll fill the shadows all the way. So I'll slide the slider all the way to the right. Then I'll change the clarity. I'll move the slider all the way to the right. The sky is a little too bright, and so is the building, so I'm going to decrease the exposure. Next, I'm going to play with the sky some more. So I'm going to click on HSL/grayscale. From here, I can play with hue, saturation, and luminance. So I'll click on the third tab, and then notice the different colors that you have here. I'm going to select the blues and move the slider to the left. And this is going to change the brightness of my sky right here. If I wish to saturate it, I can click on saturation and move the slider to the right. Let's go back to luminance, and then I'm going to play with the trees. I'll move the slider all the way to the left. And notice that it's not doing much, and the reason is there's a lot of yellow within my trees. So I'll click the yellow slider and move it to the left. And I think it's a little too vibrant, so what I'm going to do is I'll click on saturation, and then I'm going to decrease the saturation of the green color and the yellows as well. I'll go back to luminance, and I really want to increase the luminance of the building. So I can either use the reds, which I don't think it's going to do much, and I know there is a lot of orange in here, so I'll use this slider right here, and I'll move it either to the left or the right. I'll play around with it until I get a decent result. So I think I will end up moving it a little to the left instead of making it brighter. Now I'm going to go to the top and click on Tone Curve, and then I'll click on Point. I have my curve set to linear and my channel to RGB. What I'm going to do is perhaps I'm going to break this curve and create an S curve, and then I'll add another anchor at the bottom. This is going to increase my contrast, and I really don't want these dark shadows right here. And notice that the blues right here, you can switch them off if you wish. Blues indicate that I have shadows which are too dark. I can always get rid of them by clicking this anchor point right here and dragging it up. And this is going to make my image look flat. And the histogram also tells me that I don't really have that many dark shadows in here anymore. Now I'm going to click on Channel and Blue, and this time I'm going to cut this in half right here, and I want to make my shadows blue. So I'm going to drag this part up, and notice that it's changing my shadows from yellow to blue, but I don't want to mess with it too much. So I'll set it right here, and then I want to make my highlights yellow, so I'll move this part to the bottom. And I can play around with it until I get the right result. Next, I want to straighten this picture a little bit. So I'm going to click on Straighten Tool, and then I'll drag a line along the building, and then I'll hit Enter. And notice the difference. Before I open this in Photoshop, I'm going to zoom in at 100%, and I'm going to sharpen this picture by clicking on Detail. And then I'll click on Open Image. Now I'm going to bring a texture that I have scanned from a book. So I'm going to go to File, Place, and this is the book cover that I scanned the other day. And I'm simply going to place this over this picture right here. place it right here, and while holding the Shift key, I'll move the book. Now I'll click Enter to place this picture right here. And notice it's a smart object, so I can move it around if I wish. I can upsize it, I can downsize it. It doesn't really matter. The next thing I want to do is I want to unlock this layer because I want to make my canvas a little bit bigger because my book cover is a little bigger than my picture. So I'm going to double click on the background layer, and then I'll click OK. Then I'll go to Image, Canvas Size, and then I'll change my anchor. Now it's pointing to the right, which means it's going to add a few inches to the right side. And perhaps I'll change this to 25. And then I'll click OK. Now I want to place my second layer over my top layer. And then I'll hit the Alt key on my keyboard, and I'll place the mouse between the top layer and the bottom layer. And notice this arrow right here when you hold the Alt key. This is going to create a clipping mask. And that means that this picture right here at the top is going to fit within this layer right here at the bottom. My book is a little bit bigger than the picture, so I want to downsize it so it fits within. I clicked on the second layer, and then I click Control T or Command T if you're using a Mac, and I'm simply going to hold the Shift key, and then I'll downsize this book. Next, I'm going to select both of these layers, and I'm just going to center them within my canvas. Now I'm going to crop this, and to do that you can hold the Control key or the Command key if you're using a Mac, and then simply click on the book layer. And then I'm going to go to Image and Crop. And you can click Control D or Command D to deselect. Now what I want to do is, I really don't need this second layer, the book layer. And you know what? I'm going to name it a book layer by double clicking on it. And I'll simply call it Book. And I'll double click on the top layer and I'll call it Building. And this is something I should have done in the beginning, but I skipped that step. Now I'm going to rasterize my book layer because I know I'm not going to increase or decrease the size of it. So I'll right click and then I'll click Rasterize Layer. Then I'm going to desaturate it by hitting Control U or Command U if you're using a Mac, and I'll simply slide the slider all the way to the left. The reason for desaturating this layer is so that when I change the blending modes, which I'm going to do next, I'm not going to have that harsh red color. So let's change the blending modes. Usually I play around until I find the right one. And most of the time, multiply is going to work. But in this case, it doesn't work very well. Let's try screen. That doesn't work. Perhaps overlay. And this doesn't look too bad. Let's zoom in to see what we have done. Notice the texture that's showing through. This texture comes from the book. And here's the spine and other lines in the book. And it's all showing through, giving this picture some character. I really like this texture that came through right here. Let's zoom out. We can go on and on until we create something even more interesting. And I'm going to click on Create New Fill or Adjustment Layer. And then I'll select Selective Color. From the Colors menu, I am going to select Blacks. And perhaps I'm going to make my blacks just a little bit brighter. And then you can change the color for the blacks only. So I'm going to play around until I find something interesting. You can do the same thing with other colors, for example, the blues right here. Next, I'm going to apply one more simple effect. But before I do that, I'm just going to merge all of these layers because I really don't need them to be in layers anymore. So I'll select all the layers and I'll click Control E or Command E for using a Mac, and this is going to merge all the layers. I'll zoom out and I'm going to create another layer by hitting Control J or Command J if you're on a Mac. And then I'll go to Filter, Other, and I'll click on High Pass. Now it's going to give me this really ugly effect, but this is not what I'm shooting for. I'm going to zoom in, and I really want some of this detail to pop out, so I'm going to change the radius to about, I'm not sure. Let's see, 4.6 is fine. And then I'll click OK. I'll go to blending modes and I'll set it to, let's see, overlay. Yes, this will work. This is what I had before, and this is what I have now. So this is going to sharpen the image a little bit, making it look like a drawing at the same time. But I don't want this effect to take over, so I'm going to change the opacity to about 62, let's say. This is what we had before, and this is what we have now. And you can zoom in to see all the difference. So before you delete any of your pictures that you do not like, I would strongly recommend that you try to do something creative with them. Perhaps you can use them sometimes in the future, even if they don't look great right now.